Canadian grain growers are raising the alarm over the work stoppage by both of Canada's major railways. More than 9,000 workers at CN Rail and CPKC were locked out at midnight, grinding rail lines to a halt. Grain growers say they're concerned about the effect of the stoppage on the grain industry and the Canadian economy. Kyle Larkin is the Executive Director of Grain Growers of Canada. He joins us by Zoom from Ottawa. Hello.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. First, can you give me your reaction to the work stoppage that has begun?
Well, we're extremely concerned. This is unprecedented in Canadian history. Never have we ever had before both of Canada's national railways totally shut down. And our research finds that this will cost grain farmers, starting today, $50 million a day in lost sales. Simply put, grain farmers can't deliver their grain to their local grain elevators when the railways aren't operating. And we know already since Tuesday this week, new shipments of grain have been rejected from the railways. So grain elevators were already shutting down their operations and already telling no to grain farmers who are looking to deliver their grain that they're harvesting right now.
And this $50 million a day, well, how will that be impacted on the various industries? Are more of them taking it on the chin than others?
Well, this is $50 million a day lost in direct sales for grain farmers. So when grain farmers are combining their grain, which they're doing right now, they typically, some of it will be stored, but some of it will be sold directly to their local grain elevators. But right now, because of a limited storage capacity at grain elevators, they're being rejected. They're not accepting new shipments. And as we know, grain farmers are only paid when they can deliver their grain. So it's a huge issue for grain farmers that have invested thousands of dollars into their crops through the seed to start the crop, through fertilizers, through pesticides. They've been growing these crops for months. They've been waiting for their payday. Finally, the payday has come, except the grain elevators are closed and the railways are closed. So there's no payday coming anytime soon until this gets resolved.
Well, rail transport is, of course, absolutely vital to the grain industry. So the timing of this, you're saying, is absolutely devastating.
Exactly. 94% of grain is transported by rail. I've been asked today and this week, are there any alternatives out there? The simple answer is no. You cannot find enough trucks and truck drivers to transport these millions of tons of grain across the country from places like Manitoba and from other provinces in Canada. That infrastructure and those workers just don't simply exist. We need the rail system functioning to be able to transport this grain for both our domestic use, but also our international customers that are waiting for this grain so they can transform it into the products that they rely on.
So the producers of grain are basically helpless right now. There's no action they can take to preserve their grain that's already off the fields.
There's no action, unfortunately. All they can do is store it in their grain silos if they have that storage capacity. I know there's a number of grain farmers out there that are buying and spending thousands of dollars buying temporary storage capacity, which isn't 100%. There's still a risk of wildlife getting into the grain or food spoilage. So that's a big concern. But the longer this rail stoppage goes for, the more concerned we're going to be around food security, food spoilage, and everything that goes within that.
So is there an alternative? For example, would anybody leave their crop on the field and not combine yet? Or is hot weather going to deteriorate it more? How does that play out if they're standing in the fields or in the cars?
Well, when the crop's ready, the crop is ready. So farmers are out right now combining crops that are ready. Certainly, we haven't reached what I would call the peak harvest season, but we're about to reach that in a week or so in many places across the prairies. Every province, obviously, around the country is different. But I know a number of farmers out right now that are harvesting their peas. They're harvesting wheat. They're harvesting fall rye. They're out there already harvesting because the crops are ready to go. You just simply can't leave the crops there for too long, or you're going to risk losing quality or even losing yield.
You touched on the wider impact of this, but how long will it be before consumers feel the impact of the grain being stopped?
I would gander that consumers will likely see impacts within a week or so. When you look at wheat, for example, a good amount of wheat from Manitoba is transported by rail to Ontario, where then it's processed in the flour and then baked into the bread or the hot dog buns or whatever that consumers across the country are buying at their grocery stores. So without that rail transportation network, Canadians across the country, consumers across the country, are going to start seeing a shortage on their grocery shelves of products that rely on grain products. But it's also not just grain, obviously. It's everything that's transported by rail. So, you can think of fresh produce, vegetables, and fruit, amongst a number of other products on the grocery shelves that Canadians aren't going to be able to buy if this work stoppage goes for too long.
So what do you think needs to happen to resolve this?
Government needs to get involved, and it needs to take this issue more seriously than I believe they've had. They've been relying on hopes and prayers that the railways and that the union will come together. It's been almost a year of negotiations between these three parties, and they've gotten absolutely nowhere. It's time that the government looks at binding arbitration, bringing in a third-party referee to bring these parties to the table so they can hammer out an agreement for the good of Canada and for the good of the Canadian economy. If they can't come to an agreement there, then the last possible option is back to work legislation, which is necessary to keep the economy on track.
Well, thank you very much for your time today on Radio Noon.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Kyle Larkin is the Executive Director of the Grain Growers of Canada, and you can get updates on this story at cbc.ca/Manitoba.